On December 26, 2011, 30-year-old Hope Melton called her grandmother and reported that someone was following her as she drove along a rural road to her grandmother's home. Gripped by fear and confusion, Hope was unable to provide more details before the call was suddenly cut off. Surveillance camera footage was key to solving this case and helping police identify a suspect. However, the unprofessional actions of one law enforcement official negatively impacted the course of the investigation. Hope and her husband Gary Melton had been married for just over a year and were eagerly awaiting an addition to their family. Tragically, their happiness was shattered on that fateful Christmas Day in 2011. That morning, Hope set off to visit her grandmother who lived in a village about 30 miles away. She planned to arrive in time for lunch, but instead, her grandmother received an alarming call from her granddaughter. In an agitated voice, Hope pleaded for help, saying that someone was chasing her. After the call abruptly ended, Hope's mother and grandmother immediately got in the car and went searching for the missing young woman. On a remote dirt road, they spotted Hope's abandoned car on the side of the road, but there was no sign of the girl herself anywhere. Her grandmother instantly called 911, and the call was transferred to the local sheriff's office, where the report was classified as a missing person case. Realizing that every minute is precious in such situations, one of the sheriff's deputies immediately went to the scene. An inspection of Hope's car revealed no signs of an accident or mechanical damage. Her purse was in the vehicle, but her wallet was missing. A team of forensic experts thoroughly examined the car but could not find any clues as to the girl's whereabouts. Meanwhile, a search party of volunteers and police officers combed the surrounding area. Hope's husband Gary, who was stunned and beside himself with grief, also arrived at the scene. He informed the police that on her way to her grandmother's, his wife had planned to stop at a gas station. At that point, it was the only lead the detectives had to go on. The distance from Hope's house to her grandmother's home was about 30 miles, and there were 4 gas stations along that route. The detective decided to visit each one in turn. The first gas station the detective visited in his investigation of Hope Melton's disappearance was equipped with surveillance cameras. As he reviewed the footage, the detective hoped to catch a glimpse of Hope. According to her husband, she had left home around 11:45 a.m., so that time became the starting point for the search. Although silhouettes of people flickered across the screen from that day, Hope was not among them. The detective continued watching the video up until the time the young woman called her grandmother, but to no avail, she never appeared on camera. This led to the idea that she had likely filled up her car at a different gas station. Hope's family was stunned by her disappearance and tried to find some logical explanation for it. There was a faint hope that perhaps her car had gotten stuck in the mud somewhere and Hope had simply gone for help. Or that someone had picked her up on the road and taken her to a safe place. They desperately believed that the girl was all right and would soon return home safe and sound. Meanwhile, the detective in charge of the investigation visited a second gas station located 15 kilometers from where Hope's abandoned car was found. This location was also equipped with security cameras that could be key to unraveling the mystery of her disappearance. The detective's first order of business was to speak with the gas station manager, informing him about the search for the missing girl. When the investigator described Hope's appearance and the car she was driving, the manager thought he might have seen her there around noon. The exterior cameras clearly captured Hope Melton's presence at the gas station shortly before she vanished. Judging by the footage, at that moment the girl was carefreely filling up her car, suspecting nothing. Another angle showed a man holding the door open for Hope as she went inside. She paid for her gas and headed towards her vehicle. At first glance, the girl's behavior seemed quite natural, giving the impression she was cheerful and carefree. However, when the detective reviewed the recording a second time, his attention was drawn not so much to Hope as to the stranger in the white cap who had followed her into the store. The investigator tracked this suspicious character's actions as he paid at the register and left the premises. Unfortunately, none of the frames provided any clues as to this person's identity. The detective decided to look for evidence elsewhere. In the footage from the exterior cameras, hoping to at least catch a glimpse of his vehicle. One of the videos showed Hope heading towards the gas station store to pay for her fuel. At that very moment, a dark minivan pulled up and out stepped that same man in the white cap. But sadly, his license plate was out of the camera's view. The detective switched to another exterior camera angle to watch Hope drive away from the gas station. She returned to her car and was about to leave. Just then, another gray vehicle parked nearby. The driver got out and glanced back, watching Hope drive off. But neither this driver nor the man in the white cap dared to follow the girl from the gas station. The investigator replayed this clip over and over, trying to catch even the smallest detail. He had a feeling the truth was hidden right there, in that gas station footage. He just needed to look more closely. And he did notice something important. Focusing again on the moment Hope drove away from the gas station, the detective spotted a bright orange Chevrolet in the background, crossing the parking lot and turning back towards the exit. And as soon as Hope pulled away, that vehicle immediately fell in behind her. The thought crossed the investigator's mind that this mysterious pursuer could have witnessed Hope Melton's final moments before the girl disappeared. And now, with proof that someone had been following her right from the gas station, the police had to figure out what happened next. At this time, the search party made a gruesome discovery. 10 kilometers from where Hope's abandoned car was found, volunteers came across a pink bracelet and a blood-spattered side mirror. The missing girl's husband Gary recognized the bracelet. It was his Christmas gift to his wife. This find raised serious concerns for Hope's life. After reviewing the gas station footage clearly showing the orange car tailing Hope's vehicle, the detective decided to make sure it wasn't just a coincidence. On her way to her grandmother's house, the girl would have passed by an office building with numerous surveillance cameras on its facade. The investigator immediately went there, but unfortunately, due to the holiday, the office was closed. It took some time to find the manager who had the keys and was familiar with the security system. The cameras in the building covered the parking lot and the stretch of road Hope would have taken to get to her grandmother's property. The detective's main task was to determine whether the orange car continued its pursuit or turned off in a different direction at some point. The officer began reviewing the recordings starting from 12 noon. At 12:06, Hope's car appeared on one of the cameras. And just 2 seconds later, the same orange Chevrolet that had been spotted earlier in the gas station footage flashed across the screen. It was clearly visible that the pursuer was staying just meters behind the girl's car. Both vehicles were heading in the direction of where Hope's abandoned car was later found. Although the video quality did not allow the license plates to be read, the orange color and make of the car were quite distinctive. The police immediately put out an APB on it. About 2 hours passed before law enforcement managed to pull over the suspicious vehicle on a street in the town of Jefferson, South Carolina. Behind the wheel was 23-year-old local resident Nicholas Miller. There was no one else in the car besides him. The young man was visibly nervous when speaking with the police officers, as if trying to hide something. So they took him to the station for further questioning. Miller answered all of the detective's questions evasively and reluctantly. The investigator asked the suspect to recount in detail how and where he had spent that day. Nicholas claimed that in the morning he had gone shopping, particularly to a Walmart in the neighboring town about 30 miles from Jefferson. After which he immediately returned. Meanwhile, the police obtained a warrant to search Miller's car. And the detective working on Hope Melton's disappearance case personally went to that same Walmart where the suspect claimed he had been shopping. The investigators needed to carefully check his story. The Walmart sales floor was equipped with numerous surveillance cameras that meticulously recorded every movement of the shoppers. Law enforcement officers were delighted to gain access to these recordings, as they could confirm or refute Nicholas Miller's testimony. An orange Chevrolet pulled into the supermarket parking lot around 10 a.m. A man got out of the car, and the detective recognized him as the suspect. At least at this stage, his story seemed to be true. Miller nonchalantly entered Walmart like hundreds of other customers. At first glance, his behavior raised no suspicions. He didn't even take a shopping cart or basket with him. But as the detective continued watching the footage, he realized that Miller was not at all like an average shopper. Initially, it might have seemed like he was just wandering aimlessly through the store, indifferently passing by shelves full of goods. But what if his visit to the store had a completely different purpose? At one point, the detective noticed that Miller was not moving randomly, but purposefully stalking a blonde woman who was obviously unaware of his attention and calmly going about her business. After reviewing the video again, the investigator was convinced his suspicions were correct. Wherever the woman went, Miller relentlessly followed her. But then, some time later, she reappears on camera, this time accompanied by a man. It was probably at that moment Miller realized his potential victim was out of reach. When a few minutes later the couple left the store, the detective thought how incredibly lucky the woman was not to be alone, and this circumstance likely saved her from danger. A few more minutes passed and the cameras recorded Miller leaving the supermarket. His face looked sad and disappointed as he exited, as if the coveted prey had slipped right out of his hands. At that instant, the detective could only surmise that the failed stalker had headed back to Jefferson, where he eventually encountered Hope Melton at the gas station. When the police obtained a warrant to search Miller's vehicle, their worst fears about Hope's fate were confirmed. A thorough inspection of the interior revealed blood spatter on the passenger side fender and front bumper. The missing girl's wallet was also found in the car. Now that the investigators had new compelling evidence, it was decided to question Miller again. It's worth noting here that Chesterfield County Sheriff Sam Parker personally conducted the interrogation of the suspect. That name is very important, remember it. Initially during the interrogation, Miller denied any involvement in Hope Melton's disappearance, but when presented with the physical evidence found, he finally cracked. The suspect ultimately confessed to the crime and agreed to show where he had left the girl's body. Miller led the detectives to a remote farm about 12 miles from where Hope's abandoned car had been found. Her naked body was lying face down right on the ground. It was a truly horrific sight. The killer could not explain the motives for his actions. The victim's relatives were immediately informed about the terrible discovery. The tragedy that befell Hope forever changed the lives of her loved ones. Now the police could reconstruct step by step the events leading up to the girl's death. It turned out that shortly before the crime, Miller had broken up with his girlfriend. Investigators speculate this may have triggered a nervous breakdown in him, although we'll never know for certain. On that fateful day, Miller saw Hope filling up her car and that's when he decided to stalk her. The girl had just celebrated a cozy family Christmas and was now eagerly anticipating a visit with her grandmother. She had no idea someone was watching her. As soon as their vehicles ended up on a deserted country road, Hope sensed the danger and called her grandmother. Miller admitted he forced the girl to pull over onto the shoulder. He dragged her out of her car and forcibly shoved her into his vehicle. Then he took her to the woods, ripped off her clothes, and, well, you can imagine what happened next. Miller went to great lengths to cover up traces of the crime. He transported Hope's lifeless body to a remote farm where he brutally finished her off with a baseball bat. This item was later discovered by law enforcement during a search. Nicholas Miller faced a whole slew of charges in court. Additional evidence against him was provided by an ex-girlfriend who, on the eve of the trial, handed over to police photographs showing Miller following her in his orange Chevrolet just hours before Hope Melton's abduction. However, an equally important role in this story was played by Sam Parker, the sheriff of Chesterfield County. The circumstances of his dismissal from the police force warrant separate attention. Officially, Parker was accused of excessive leniency towards inmates, misappropriation of property belonging to the sheriff's office, using official property for personal purposes, and unjustifiably providing uniforms, badges and weapons to outside individuals. As it turned out, Parker allowed 2 inmates to live and sleep outside the prison in exchange for doing work on his property. These individuals were granted permission to sleep right in the armory, where they had unimpeded access to the internet, communication devices, and could receive an unlimited number of visitors without supervision by prison staff. The prosecution alleged that Sheriff Parker also indulged one of the inmates by allowing him to consume alcohol and meet with women. The prisoners were even given the opportunity to visit stores and dine in restaurants. Allegedly in exchange for this, they did repair work on the sheriff's house and took care of his personal property. Ultimately, all these facts resulted in Parker being put on trial. Michael Lee, who is serving a 15-year sentence for arson, also ended up on the witness stand. He gave incriminating testimony against the former head of the local police. According to Lee, while in the Chesterfield County Jail, he managed to outfit his cell with a flat-screen TV, refrigerator, and new mattress. All these items were purchased with his own money sent by relatives. Lee told the jury how he would have lunch with the sheriff's deputy and was allowed to buy and wear civilian clothes instead of a prison uniform. He also mentioned his work at one of the county's impound lots, where he had free access to the internet, telephone communication, and even set up a social media account. Eventually Lee moved from his cell to the armory in the sheriff's office. There he received female visitors and even hosted a birthday party for himself. Guests were treated to steaks and alcoholic beverages. A party thrown by an inmate right in the sheriff's office, that's unheard of, isn't it? Share your thoughts about this in the comments. Lee added that he became quite close with Parker. He did work around his house, accompanied the sheriff to church, and even bought gifts for his daughter. In 2014, the former head of the local police Sam Parker was found guilty on 5 counts of misconduct in office, 2 episodes of providing contraband to individuals in custody, and 1 instance of embezzlement. He was sentenced to 2 years in prison with the right to parole. After the verdict was announced, Parker publicly apologized to his family for the inconvenience caused, and also expressed remorse to his former law enforcement colleagues. But how is all this connected to the murder of Hope Melton? Here's how. It was Sheriff Sam Parker who conducted the interrogation of Nicholas Miller, during which the suspect confessed to the crime and revealed where he had hidden his victim's body. Miller was facing the death penalty, but the sheriff's actions prevented the prosecution from securing that sentence. Because during the interrogation, Parker promised the suspect that if he confessed to the murder and told what happened to Hope Melton, he would not face capital punishment. Of course, the sheriff had no authority to make such promises. But naive Miller believed him and admitted his guilt. In doing so, Parker seriously compromised the investigation, because from a legal standpoint, all those confessions obtained under false pretenses had no force. In March 2015, 27-year-old Nicholas Miller stood trial, where he pleaded guilty to all charges against him. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Hope Melton's family and loved ones were outraged by the former sheriff's actions, as he himself had been convicted of corruption the year before, and his conduct jeopardized the successful conclusion of the court case against the girl's killer. Elizabeth, the victim's mother, bluntly stated that the family had hoped to hear a death sentence for Miller and was extremely disappointed when that didn't happen in the end. The Melton family said they are still waiting for an apology from Parker. I look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. Until next time, friends.